Great. Good evening, all. Welcome to the PBC meeting of Monday, September 11th. We are doing it remote, so we will follow as we normally do in terms of the proceedings. Tonight we have 1, 2, 3, 4 with a possible fifth item, depending when we get there, whether there's any changes or discussion tonight. And in terms of kicking it off, I'll kick it off with the approve the minutes and request a motion to approve the last meeting minutes. And before I do that, sorry, Catherine, I think we have 2 meeting minutes to approve. Is that correct? Or we caught up on?
No, I think we're caught up.
Thank you. All right, just want to verify. All right, so this is just a motion to approve the previous meeting's minutes. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to the roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
And the chair is aye. Okay, great. Thank you all. All right, with that, we'll move into the first main agenda item, which is the Emery Grover update. And I'll turn that to you, Ken, or...
Yeah,
Yep. Great.
pop the agenda up there and then let me get the well, I'll do the status update by looking at actually let me call the pictures up instead. All right. The first picture here is the inside of the typical look inside the chimneys. And we need to do some structural work on these, and we'll talk about that when we get to the ACL. They're not as thick as originally thought. So we may need to now I don't know why my screen is not scrolling it. There we go. They've taken off most of the slate on the roofs and putting down plywood, and this is the membrane. Now you'll see in the ACL, or excuse me, in the change order, we had to add plywood over the existing roof condition because, and I will get to that best picture for that real quick. You can see the seams in the wood. And the concern was that when they went to adhere the membrane, number one, they weren't going to get it on flat. And secondly, nailing the slate shingles, you could end up with nails going in the seams, which obviously wouldn't give you a hold. So what we determined was the best route was to overlay the whole roof with 1/2-inch plywood and then put the membrane down on that. It does eliminate the need to do most of the plank replacement. So there was a little trade there, and we'll talk about that a little bit further when we get to the change orders. Just more typical pictures in the inside. You can see some of the steel beams with the inset LVL. And you can see some where we had to cut the joists to run those through. This is where we took off the lower 3 feet. Part of the contract was to replace the lower 3 feet of the roof with new plywood, which has been done to completion now. Again, another look at that for the plywood. More look at the beams going in down in the basement. Some of the stuff had to be welded. And again, the look at the ice and water shield going on the roof.
Can you pause there for 1 second?
Sure.
The
Where?
ice and what?
Ice and water?
Just a little concern about the workers up there. Are they tied off?
They usually are. This picture may not show that, but yes, they usually are when they.
I would hope
there-
so.
There are certain conditions, George, where they can't be, just because of where they're working. But for the most part, yes, they are tied off.
Because I'm sure that guy that's standing there on the left,
On the left, he is not, no. But then again, as I'm looking at it, I don't know where he tied to.
I understand.
That chimney's not
OSHA
as close as it looks.
OSHA would not be very happy if they saw that picture.
No, and they weren't very happy when they came over when someone called OSHA, sent a picture of, I don't know what it was they sent, but it was unplanked scaffolding and holes in the floor, which, yeah, there were holes in the floor, but guys are working in it. But anyways, nothing has come of that. So their visit went okay. There were no huge issues, but
Are
yes,
they that, I would say, not careful? On a situation like that, I would be very unhappy.
yes, and I'd have to check with O'Connor to see whether anything was said to these guys when the picture was taken. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm gonna follow up on George's point. Is I think that you just need to, it was somebody from the town or somebody needs to say it's unacceptable and that they've got to have their game together. I think that's what you're saying, George, is that we can't be put in this position. This is the contractor's responsibility.
Yes, and Roy,
Absolutely.
we went through that after the OSHA visit.
Okay,
But also, there is continuous planking along that edge. And you can see at the bottom of the picture there, and then there's a railing behind that.
Yeah, there's nowhere for them to fall to besides
So
that.
so technically, this is not over the 6 foot
Right.
fall height.
Yeah.
I understand, but there are also spears sticking up in the air, and there'd probably be a pretty severe injury if that guy fell from there. That's just my comment.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And again, we've had those discussions.
Okay, good.
Can you just go quickly to the roof, the bottom 3 feet section picture?
Sure.
The only question just to clarify, so you're putting new 3/4 plywood in there, and then you're putting 1/2 inch all the way from there up.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And the eave has already been reconstructed, as you can see there.
Yeah.
And I think I got there's just shots of the plywood.
Yeah.
And again, that's the look with the seams. And that's the last one of that. So
And in that upper portion of that one, you can also see the finished chimney with the cap in place.
Ken, we lost your screen.
yeah, I'm trying to get back to the
We saw the cap last week, right? Or the last update, because you.
yes, it was in the last update, Stuart. Yes, it was.
And the chimney, when I was on Chapel Street driving pointing towards Emery Grover the other day, and I just could see the chimneys from a distance. I was just really amazed how well they came out.
All right, we get back to the agenda here. All right, so again, the caps were installed, structural steel install continues. They started doing the north stair today. And they continue to do the cutting and pasting for the steel beams. And again, the plywood and ice and water is underway. The ACL, the first one is not new. Actually, the first 4 are not new, but the structural chimney price went up after the last engineer's design. We're ready to get started with that. What we're not ready to get started is the last item, which is the structural brickwork, which was the first pass on the design was very intensive, and I'm not even going to get into what the price was. Suffice to say, it was well over anything we could afford. So the engineer is looking at that again, working with the Mesa to come up with some cost savings, some value engineering. The shoring is still an unknown. We have a shoring guy coming out hopefully sometime this week, shoring engineer to take a look at that and draw up something for us in conjunction with our own structural engineer. And there will be a schedule push as a result of this work. Until we determine what the work is, we can't determine what that push is, but whatever that push is obviously will entail additional general conditions. So, questions?
Yes, I have a question. If I may, the structural chimney, we had that before. So what you're saying is based on the interior picture that you showed, the interior aspect of the chimney, that's now increasing that number, or is that going to be a separate number?
That's this number is all in, Stuart.
Okay, all right.
So I have a question about their approach to the solution to that problem. How are they planning on supporting that? Without going into great detail, how are they planning on supporting that chimney work?
Grouting and pinning.
Grouting
They'll
and pinning.
drill holes to pin the whites together, and then they'll drill holes to grout the void to tie the either 2 or 3 whites, depending on which wall it is, together.
You're talking about the chimney that we just saw in the picture, or
Correct. But the two
the other
chimneys,
structural brickwork?
that's the 2 chimneys. The other structural brickwork will have some similar work to it, but there's also some remove and rebuild to that. But again, the design is not finalized.
So are they running a pin through that one of the walls and back into the one behind it through the
Correct.
opening?
Correct, yes.
So it's essentially like running a bar across that gap. in
No,
the
they won't
chimney.
across the gap in the whites, yes, not across the whole chimney. Just within the 2 of the walls are 2 bricks, 2 whites deep. The other 2 walls are 3 whites deep.
And for any openings that are required for the mechanical, they'll be putting lintels, picture frame lintels, to support and transfer the load.
So that chimney, without doing this, is really I'm going to use a quote, piece of work. It's really
Yes, but you have to remember, George, it wasn't designed to hang steel off of, which we're doing now.
I understand.
So if we weren't hanging the steel off of it, we might not have to do anything.
Yeah, I'm not too confident in that chimney lasting another 50 years.
Oh, I think it'll last a good 100.
You think so?
Once
It's grouted. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, once
everything
it's
is filled.
repaired.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it were left that way, it wouldn't last very long. It looks like it's in tough shape and it has to be done anyway. But in any event, we're going to fix it.
Yes.
So just to carry the structural brickwork, the last item is related or not related? Can you clarify that one?
It's not related to the
Not
chimney. The chimneys is a separate item. The
Right.
structural brickwork is only on the exterior walls.
Okay, can we just classify that as structural exterior brickwork?
Sure.
It essentially connects the outer wall to the inner brick wall, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And you're using a similar approach. I mean, that you're doing in the chimneys. You're drilling,
Similar, right?
adding pins, sticking in mortar. So it's the same work. It's just a different part of the
Right.
building.
it's a lot more-
Except for at the roof sill, which is a remove and going to be some semblance of remove and replace. Right now, it's approximately 90% of the perimeter. We're working to drive that down based on some further testing and examination.
And there's a lot more connections to make in connecting the outer wall and the inner wall.
Correct.
There
It's a
is the
16,
chimney.
it's a 16 by 16 grid. You're drilling holes every 16 inches.
Right. There's a lot more work associated with that than it is to structurally reinforce the chimney.
Correct. Yeah, you've got a lot more lineal footage, square footage. Absolutely. Anything else?
I don't see any head nodding or hands up. So go ahead.
Actually,
Well, I'm holding my breath when I think about the contingency and this work.
Yes, continue to hold your breath, George.
I know that's the concern that I have.
Yep.
I'm sure.
But I can't make a full evaluation until we've got the
I understand.
whatever we can do with the design finalized.
Yep.
But I can tell you that if we have to go with it as is, or even 3/4 of as is, there's going to be some long, hard discussion and decisions that have to be made.
Well, I mean, right now you've got 80% of contingency still available,
We've
correct?
got about 2 million.
Right. So the concern is that the brickwork comes back at substantially higher.
Well, not high. It won't come back higher than the contingency, but it'll eat up such a chunk that we'd have to decide which way we go. Because we either have to bank that we don't use the rest of it up before the end of the job, or do we take a chance, move forward? And if it looks like we're going to be running short, we may have to go to town meeting in May.
Well, but I guess before I don't think the contingency should drive it just yet. It's what's got to be done for the building correctly. It's got to drive it.
Right, but if we can minimize what we have to do, if we can cut back on that scope, and already there's been changes that have been made. So if we can cut back on that scope enough to give us a level of comfort with the contingency, we can certainly go down that road. But you're right, Stuart, that isn't, but we still have to be mindful of running out of money.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I guess this sounds like it's a serious enough problem to evaluate as best and quickly as possible. But what I thought I was hearing was that there might be options in the work, and sort of a level of options that says, hey, if we have the money, we might want to go a little bit extra just to do it a little bit extra versus the bare minimum. And if we think it's going to push up, we do the bare minimum.
No, we're going to do.
I don't want to operate that way. I want to
we're going to do what we need to do to stabilize the wall. It's just a matter of, is it this or is it that?
Can I add something? And the structural engineer's been talking a lot about just that the need is to bring it back to a state of repair, of solid repair, and we're not compromising that sort of the structural approach. But one thing that we looked at and realized would save probably a good chunk of money is, rather than drilling these helical ties from the inside of the building and worrying that the guys might drill too far and damage the exterior brick, we decided to go from the outside, and it'll be much, much easier for the guy to just do it from the outside and go in as far as he needs to go in. We didn't want to do that originally because we didn't want to have holes in the nice orange brick, but they did some mock-ups today and realized we could actually go in at some of the joints and do it, and it's a minor cosmetic thing that we think won't even be noticeable, but that should make it go much faster and easier. I mean, I don't know how much means, but yeah, a not insignificant revision of the approach.
What's the timing on this? When do we think we'll be at a point of enough insight to make some decisions?
Well, certainly for the next meeting, for this committee, but we hope to have the answers sooner than that.
How do we want to address that? If you're looking, the committee will need to evaluate it, I think, because it's going to be sizable, correct?
Correct.
We could initiate it on time and materials, particularly for the north wall. The north wall has to be expedited so that the work above to start installing the framing for the new mechanical loft and dormer is really the first priority. They can also proceed with the chimney work. And we would come back at the next meeting with specifics and requests for approval.
I feel like we need to know more about this between now and the next meeting. So that we can ask intelligent questions and make an informed decision at the meeting. So from that point of view, I think it would be helpful if we got the recommendations sometime before that meeting, more than just the weekend. Let's say, a week before, so we can at least understand what's going on.
We'll do our best, but we still have to bring in the shoring engineer. We still have to bring in a redesign on the structural engineer. So it will be close to get the information for the next meeting.
Well, Ken, we can share bulletin 27.
Yeah, that'll give you the current, Hank, but it won't give you what we will end up doing.
Right.
That doesn't have the shoring and that doesn't have the schedule impact either. So
No,
it'll be an
it-
incomplete
it-
evaluation.
It identifies graphically for the committee what the initial recommendation was from the structural engineer. And,
Sure, I'll send that out tomorrow.
okay,
But what?
But again, keep in mind that is not the final design, and it does not incorporate all the pieces of what we'll have to pay for, if you will, if we have to go that route.
But I heard you say that we need to potentially make some decisions before the next meeting.
No, we'll make this. I don't think we'll have information enough, Stuart, to make a decision before the next meeting.
Okay, so we can get to the next meeting to address this in more detail.
Correct.
All right.
And there's no guarantee I will have all the pieces by then either.
Just make sure you list what the issues are that are still unresolved, and that's fine. Anything to educate us better before we get to the point where we have to make a decision would be helpful.
okay.
And Ken, you had told me when I was there that you were anticipating that because some of this can be done, some of that work on the structural can be done, all the things are going on, that it wouldn't necessarily have a huge impact on the schedule, but it might have some. Do you have any sense for that at this point? That changed?
I don't at this point, Michael. Because if you go with the current design, it's one thing. If you go with a reduced design or a change in it, it's another. I mean, the numbers have been bandied about 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Don't know.
And the other parallel question is whether this work could be going on concurrently with other work. It just means that we want to keep the masons on the site
Right.
for the next several months to keep them rolling on their work.
Right. And other work can be done by other trades, interior.
Yes, can be
Right.
done concurrently, and
But
currently is.
we're fast running out of time for the structural steel guys. Getting that north wall completed.
Okay.
All right. And go to the voting items. 2 things of note on the voting items. One is for change order number 6, the number that Stuart will have is the correct number. My math skills failed me and I did not add in PCO 30, so the number is 71.5 and some change. And also there was a slight change to the requisition between the time I sent this out and today. So again, the number that Stuart has will be it's around 880,500 is the actual number. So the number, Stuart, you have will be voting on is the correct number, but
Right.
neither of those numbers will match what's on this sheet.
Okay, great. All right, so then we will move to those voting items. First, we will put forth the change order and then we will do the invoices. I'll read them out. So there's one change order number 6. It is for M. O'Connor Contracting for $71,902 coming out of the general contracting budget. I put that forth for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, coming to the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
I,
Roy,
Aye.
Lynn,
I,
Jean,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. Okay, thank you. Next is a set of invoices. We'll do one invoice and then there's the 2 final will be grouped together because of the budget. Invoice number 9 for M. O'Connor Contracting, requisition number 9 through August 2023 for $880,528.73. Coming out of the general contracting budget, I put forth for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Seeing none, here none, come to the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
I,
Roy,
Aye.
Lynn,
I,
Jean,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. Okay, the final 2 invoices I'll put together. They're both BH&A coming out of the architectural budget. The first one is July 2023 for Emery Grover for $17,219.87. Second invoice is for BH&A Emery Grover, but for FF&E for $12,500. Total is $29,719.87. Again, coming out of the architectural budget. I'm putting that forth for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
is that, is that first item that's on the list that I'm looking at? Or
Yes,
is-
there's 3 parts to it, 2 invoices, but 2 parts to the first invoice.
But the numbers are different.
Yeah, the 17,000 and is add the 219 to the 17,000. That was the first number I put out there,
Okay,
and then 12,500.
Yep.
All 3 of those numbers add up to $29,719.87. Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none, coming to the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
I,
Roy,
Aye.
Lynn,
I,
Jean,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and
Aye.
chair's eye, and that is do we, oh no, that's coming up next. Let me just make sure. Yeah, that's it for Emery Grover.
Correct.
Any other invoices that we've missed?
Nope, that's it.
That's
Great.
it.
Okay, any other items for you, Ken?
No, sir.
Okay, then I will close down the Emery Grover and we will now move to the school master plan. And that is you, Hank.
Yes, and I will recognize Michelle Rogers from Doran Whittier.
You need to add Don in. Don's in the waiting.
Yes, yes, thank you. Oh, okay, I didn't. Let me see.
I think I mentioned last time to the committee that the MSBA responded to the statement of interest. The town submitted 2, one for Mitchell, one for Pollard, prioritizing Pollard. And the MSBA will be coming out for what is called a senior study in early October to look at the facility and to talk about better understand what the deficiencies are within the building. That is an important first step, but it's by no means a guarantee of being invited into participation within their eligibility process. And are there any other comments you want to make about that? Okay. So with that, we've asked Doran Whittier to go back in and update the master plan cost estimates associated with that options C and D, and also option E. So Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Hank. Excuse me. Hello, everyone. So as you can imagine, costs are very fluid. We just did this presentation to school committee the other night. Just wanted to, we told them to let you know that we're keeping a close eye on what's happening out there. COVID changed a lot of things. The escalation rates have stayed up. It looks like there's a leveling off occurring, and we're going back to, quote, normal escalations here in the near future. But it's so hard to project when you're looking at 3, 5, 30 years out from where we are today. So on top of that, we've got the new energy code that we're addressing and including that within our costs. So just as a precursor to the presentation tonight, just want you to know that we're staying on top of this with Peter Bradley, our cost estimator, who's staying on top with everything else that's happening within the Commonwealth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle to go through our brief presentation just to give you an update as to where we are.
Hit the share button. It always helps. Can you all see the presentation here?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Let's see. You'd think by now I could figure out. There we go. So as Hank had said, we have come back and looked at the options C, D, and E. The difference between these three options is E is sort of a status quo, where the Mitchell students stay at Mitchell, you maintain a separate grade 6 school, and you begin to add on to each of your buildings to meet the needs of the projected enrollments. And the C and D options look at it differently. They look at moving grade 6 over to the Pollard School, and then whether or not you have MSBA participation in the Pollard School is the difference between those two options. In the first option, you would have MSBA participation in Pollard, and in the second option, in D, you would not. And the difference in that is that your timeline for Mitchell adjusts, because you would theoretically be able to go and request an SOI for Mitchell because you are doing Pollard on your own. The column to the right, which shows the numbers, show different options. We had a C1A and a C2 and a D1A and a D2 option. And so those are the ranges within those options. And the numbers associated with option E cite the 500.7 plus site costs. We have some unknown site costs with both the High Rock and the Elliott schools. And then on the far right-hand side, you see some of those pros and cons that we had initially identified back when we first started the program for the master plan. One of the things that was asked of us the other night when we presented to school committee was that we actually identify on the slides that MSBA funding is not included in any of these cost estimates. So although there's different options for the funding, all these numbers show total project costs and do not include any guessing towards what the MSBA would contribute to your funding. So with that, we'll take a first look at option C1A. You'll notice that most of these, the dates have just shifted based from what you had seen last year or even previous to that. And with the shifting of those dates, there's been the addition of added escalation for the extent of time that we've pushed things out. And we've also added the additional cost for capital improvements. So that is the number here at the bottom of most of these. It's the line item. It's the cost of keeping the buildings running until you can bring students in or out of those buildings, or until construction starts. So you can see that in Mitchell School here, it goes out for 9.5 years. And again, just to remind everybody that those capital improvements have a limit as to how much you can spend over a 3-year period. So this is looking at the maximum amount that you could spend over those each of those 3 years. And this one assumes for 9 years. And again, down here, a maximum of what you can spend over that 3 years. And that's based on the value of the buildings. And so you can see that in this program, we'd be looking at the Pollard School being an MSBA project, and you have submitted your SOI, and so you would begin this process of marching down through the process here if you're accepted into the program, and you would be looking at full occupancy, including grade 6, in September of 2031. That would also be the year that you would move students from the Mitchell School into the High Rock School, and also be the year that you would start asking the MSBA for participation in the Mitchell School. And that would bring that construction date out towards 2038. And then below here, the updated costs for those buildings and for the CIP. And again, as Don has mentioned, the updated costs include not only escalation as we know it now, but also additional funding for the changes in the energy code.
How much is the escalation?
Per year, or what
No,
are we
just in total. How much of this cost the 465? Is it 20 million? Is it 5 million approximately?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I will tell you for the Pollard School, we escalated at 6.5% up to 2030, and for the Mitchell School, this was at 4% or 4.5% all the way out. And that's because what we know is that we've experienced this upfront cost and escalation, but as Don has just mentioned, we see it tapering out and returning back to quote unquote normal escalation. I can get the numbers of
just approximately. I think it's important to know that number. I know the escalation percentages, but I didn't know what the totality was.
Okay.
Sure. And given that there aren't any building designs yet, there really isn't any detail developed, these escalation numbers are quite conservative, we'd like to think, barring any pandemics or natural disasters that we can't foresee right now.
Yeah.
And pretty much based on, the gross square footage and the cost of those.
Right. In renovation versus new.
Right.
You went over these numbers with the school committee?
We presented to them last week.
That's correct. Last Tuesday night.
Time's flying by.
And
Go ahead.
I assume you got lots of gasps. GASPS.
I understood. I didn't know how to comment.
Yeah,
These are the most staggering numbers I've ever seen.
So true. One way to look at this too is this is, per project. If we were to look at it this way, you've moved students in here, and then you can reassess the needs that you have around the Mitchell School project by doing a second round of master planning. So you do have that sort of break in between where you can reassess the cost for Mitchell.
I think what else is important is that if MSBA accepts Pollard into the program, or even if they don't, the town decides to move forward with a project, a singular project, whatever that project is, obviously will be developed in more detail, and at that time we'll have a much better handle on the costs, because they become more real as the project gets closer to a bid date or a GMP if it's CM at risk.
Or even, the design. So this is based on gross square footage, but we also have a lot of design work in the site for the Pollard School.
Yep.
Yeah, I just would echo George will make, because not to belabor it by any means, but I think part of this puzzle is for people to appreciate what these costs are about, though we've been deep in them for a while. I can't help from a layman's terms simply look at what 8 years ago was Newton having a brand new high school that went way over. What was that, 160, 180? I don't know, somewhere in there. And we're only talking about an existing school getting modified of 313. So, and even, Mitchell of 151 when Sunita Williams was 54, correct? Hank? So I think it's just really, the numbers are the numbers, but it's still something that a lot of people outside of the circle need to sort of begin to understand why it is staggering, but it is staggering. It's huge.
Yeah, and that's really fair, Stuart, and interesting. Every other community that's looking at projects of this magnitude are dealing with the same things that you're talking about here right now.
Yeah. I just think it's gone so significant. It's so significant that, you know, part of the process that we're undertaking here is doing the right thing of what it's about. But then from a school committee and everybody else having to take it and help socialize so people can really begin to appreciate it. And you have your hand up.
I do. Obviously, most of this escalation is due to the economic factors and the supply chain and all of those contributing issues. But I would say that some of the escalation is due to the fact that the schedule of the projects has been extended by 1 or 2 years, depending on what the project is. The Pollard project schedule was reworked a bit to accommodate, in this scenario, the full time expected for the MSBA approval process, as well as a 3-summer sort of commissioning for the Pollard. So that added a year to that project, which obviously increased the cost. Additionally, some of the escalation reflects the additional costs that would result from adopting the higher energy codes that had not been included in the previous cost estimates. So while the vast majority of the cost is due to the escalation, I just did want to let you know that those were some other factors.
Sure. But I think we all sort of are grasping it, but outside, as I said, outside of this group, and as it starts to become more of a town discussion, I think there can be a little bit of, anyways, it's
Sure.
big. It's big.
So for what it's worth, we are tracking other school projects that are in design and going out to bid, and we have one of our own that will be bidding the beginning of next year, which is a 1,080 student middle school in Haverhill. So that could be a bit of an indicator too, as you compare what we're projecting to what might be actual in current dollars come the beginning of next year.
You know, and Stuart, I mean, I did make a point of saying to folks that, you know, not all surprises are bad surprises. Not all change go the wrong way. There's just so much here that we don't know yet in terms of what we're going to do, what the project will look like. I think, you know, it's important to take a deep breath and look at the numbers. They are large. There's a lot of escalation, a lot of which is economically driven. And again, you know, people are going to be looking at some of the other projects. And one of the questions people will ask is, well, how does this compare to what's going on around us? Because the reality is these are projects we are going to have to tackle. I think everyone realizes the longer you wait, they get even more expensive. So it's not that this number is, oh, wow, great, we can handle this. It is a huge lift, but there's just a lot to still be done. And I think we just, you know, we getting the number out initially and reminding people that there's a lot of unknowns in there, and some of which a lot of this has to do with how far out these projects go. It's just, that's the reality.
No, I agree. And I think the reason I asked the question, Michelle, about the total for escalation, Michael and Anna, I think part of the puzzle is much like the Emery Grover discussion. The more people ponder and wait, the higher the cost. And I think escalation, more than any time, even though it might level out, is really a big contributor. And I think it's a big contributor to this increase. And the more we get that out there, the more it becomes an imperative, I hope, for everybody that this is important to realize that they got to make decisions sooner rather than later.
That's certainly the view the school committee takes in general, that, you know, this is a decision we have to make, but we want to get as much as we can so people have a sense of where we are.
To your point, Stuart, escalation is a huge part of this number, and I will get the number for you so that you're able to speak about that. I think Hank has his hand up. Oh, sorry, that's not my job.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did take a quick look back, and it's at least 25% of this number is due to the escalation. And in part, particularly on Pollard, the number that we started with was a 2020 number. We're already 3 years past that. And when you escalate at 6%, it adds up a lot more quickly than it does 4.5%. But also, Michael, as you, I think, pointed out to the school committee, if you go to the numbers on the MSBA website, you'll see that the cost per square foot that's projected here is in the mid-range. It's not at the very high end of what is being built today. So that doesn't add much comfort, but I think there's a certain reality to it that delay is only going to continue to add cost.
Do we have a school currently being built or just starting in the Commonwealth?
Oh, yeah.
That's in that ballpark? Don?
Well, yeah, there's something being built all the time. We can go back and with the MSBA website
Well,
and see where they stand.
I'm just curious. How that's changed in terms of escalation over the last year. Let's say a year ago they had a cost, and now they're in construction. How has that construction budget changed before bid and then after bid?
Yeah, sure. No. Good point, George. I 2021 to 22, there was approximately 15% jump in escalation. And if you were reading the papers, there were many communities who were bidding projects or trying to get their CM to a GMP, guaranteed maximum price, and they were all falling short. We actually ran into that with our Westwood project too. We were more fortunate with our Westwood project where we didn't have the huge jump that many other projects had, where they had to go back to their communities for more funds. So that was a big leap there. There hasn't been a jump like that since, but it has still continued to escalate. So we can look a little deeper at that and see where that stands. Absolutely.
Plus, George, I'd also add, I believe that the MSBA during that time period canceled their envelope roof repair and other repair projects so that they could then add additional funding to the larger projects that had fallen short.
Right.
I'd say 90% of those projects needed additional funding, both from the MSBA and from their local districts.
Right.
Unfortunately, the reality in Needham is that we get contributions from MSBA, but they're not as large as other towns.
That is correct, and actually, it's happened across the board where since the cost of construction has escalated so much, MSBA's rate of reimbursement in terms of their construction dollars per square foot do not keep up with that, and they were never intended to. But even though MSBA continues to increase their dollars per square foot, it just hasn't been able to keep up with that spike in the escalation.
So the bottom line is Needham ends up paying a larger share than in the past.
Yes, that is correct. Absolutely.
I think that's true for everybody. I mean, a couple of months ago, I looked at a couple of the projects. There were two, I think it was Westwood and Wellesley. There were two projects in like communities. When I was just doing a quick calculation of, what was the total MS3A contribution? Because the challenge for people trying to understand this is you have to explain that, there are things that don't count, blah, 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 blah. But when you strip it all away, those two communities, that I looked at that were like us, the net reimbursement that the communities got for the all-in project costs was about 20%. Okay.
Yep.
and again, it's just something because you have to.
It's in
put
the same
something-
ballpark as we have.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, we would get about the same as they would basically.
Another.
And that was the
another way-
all-in project cost, because again, that's what
Right.
people see. And again,
Sure.
that's not the reimbursement rate, but I tried to strip that out so people could see if you're doing a 300 million project and the MSBA is going to play, you might just as, I wouldn't say this in front of a town meeting because you don't want to give them a number they think they're going to get, but in front of a group like this explaining a project, you can say, well, maybe it's 60 million of that, because you're going to have to make that estimate at some point to make a decision on whether you want to wait for the MSBA, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull it back if I could. Back to you, Michelle, but I think it's a
Right.
very valid discussion. We're dealing with some big numbers here.
So I think this actually demonstrates some of what you've been talking about. In this option here, you would still go forward with the Pollard as an MSBA project, but you would do the Mitchell School as a non-MSBA project. And thereby doing that, you actually can shave a year off of your time. And that 1 year, if you remember the number we were just looking at was 151.4. And this one's 147. So that's a difference of $4.2 million in 1 year, that far out. So that's time is money. I guess this sort of drives that home, right? So same exact timeline here. The only difference is that you're shortening this by 1 year because you're going at it by yourself. What we did include here was the submission of an SOI, and then the idea that you would move forward whether or not you were accepted.
Yeah, we saved on Sunita Williams, we probably saved a year and a half on schedule.
Yes,
Because
did.
we pushed MSBA into something they didn't really want to do initially, and we said, we can do this, and they kind of followed along. And we saved a lot of money in escalation on that for sure.
Right, and so if you use that Sunita Williams model, you saved probably 3 or 4 months up front, you saved a few months in between, and then you saved time at the end. So across the entire project, that added up to almost a year.
Yep.
So this is the C2 model. The D1A model, this one actually says that Pollard you go it alone. So here you're looking at the savings here of $12 million because you're saving a year on the timeline for Pollard. Right, you're moving in at 2030 rather than 2031. And then because of that, you're actually have the ability to ask for submit the Mitchell SOI earlier, because you're only going to be asking for one project. Again, time is money, so you're shortening that overall time length, and here you've actually reduced the cost again from the previous one, which was 147.6 to 139.9. So again, just bringing all of what you've said home again, that time is money. And then you'll have to make the decisions about which way you want to go if you are participating in the MSBA, how that does play into the dollar amounts that you're looking at. And again, as a reminder, these numbers do not include any MSBA funding. And then finally, the D2 option here, similar as the previous one that we just looked at, only here both projects are not using MSBA funding. So you're saving money, but you're doing it all by yourself across the board. Finally, we have this status quo project, and this one is the option E, which the timeline goes way out to, I think it's 2050. We'll see it in 1 second. And here, this is building a 4-section Mitchell school. So in order to do that, you have to relocate those students to the temporary facility, which means building, what we've talked about building was a modulars down on DeFazio Field at the cost of $40.3 million to do that as part of your Mitchell project. So your Mitchell project, even though because it's earlier, you don't have that escalation, you do have this combined cost, bringing that number up to 188.6. So that makes this Mitchell project more expensive than the previous two that we looked at. You're extending the amount of money that you have to invest into the Pollard School to keep it running up until year 2033, when you can actually begin the design work here. If you wanted to go all the way up to 2036, we would extend that up to 2036 until construction begins. But then this would be a 7th and 8th grade school only, because you still need, you're not turning High Rock into an elementary school, so you would continue to use High Rock as your grade 6 school. High Rock, as it exists currently today, is overcrowded. It would just continue to be overcrowded until you can go ahead and put this addition onto High Rock. We estimated this based on the size of the addition that you would need at that time in 2044 or 2046. What we didn't include here, just because there were so many unknowns, was the cost of the site work for that project. Once that was finished, you would, here you go, High Rock addition, you would then go and solve the overcrowding that's still existing within several of your elementary schools, and specifically at Elliott, and you would create a 4-section school there. And again, the same scenario here. What we did was we estimated the cost of this addition, but we have a lot of site unknowns. So it would be 41.0 million plus the site work for that program there. And again, it's the longest. It takes you all the way out to September of 2053 before your entire master plan is complete. So I'm gonna go all the way back up to the top here. I can, so that you can see those all together again. Oops. And ask if you have any additional questions.
Any questions from the committee? I want to just try and stay on time here, but any burning questions? Any actions we need to take with this at this point? I think.
No actions. There is one invoice.
Yes, I have that, but
We wanted to keep the PVVC informed the same way the school committee has been informed. And clearly this will also be a discussion eventually with select board and with FinCom. And Michael, I don't know if there's timing yet set for those discussions, but I think we will be waiting until after the visit from MSBA to see what transpires.
Not that we're having that. Yeah, that does make sense. We want to know a little bit more.
Have we ever gotten any feedback from Dave Davison regarding what we can afford? And he was looking at what we might be able to afford and what our limits might be. Have we ever gotten any official feedback?
Yeah, yes. Anne, you want to discuss that?
Well, the initial estimates that he prepared, he has not revised, so I'm not exactly sure what you're thinking about.
Well, a year ago, there was a financial plan that he put together that demonstrated how much, if at that time we took, I think it was option D, he looked at that and what the borrowing percentages would be, and we would exceed the limits, the 10% and the 3% for a certain period of time. Capping out, I think at 15%.
And did we ever get any feedback from FinCom regarding what their comments on that would be? I don't remember seeing it or hearing it.
Well, they were advocating option E, stretching it out for 30 years. Because they felt that was the only way in which to contain the costs within the borrowing limits. And from an educational perspective, that clearly runs a risk at compromising the education provided, particularly to the middle schoolers, but also to those in Mitchell.
And I would argue it doesn't necessarily make the most financial sense when you look at the total cost and what you're getting for it, but that's a different part of the discussion.
When you think about something going out as long as 2040 to 2050, you're talking about Broad Meadow and Elliott becoming 50 years old.
Yep.
Or 40 years old.
And
It's
they
kinda
weren't
scary.
represented.
And the Pollard modulars are 21 years old now.
Yeah, I know. Anyway,
All right, so maybe we could get some of that information at some point. At this stage, is there anything else besides the invoice? Any other final questions? So I'd like to get the back on track with the agenda, please. There's no questions, then I'm going to move to the invoice. There's one invoice. I'll put forth the Doran Whittier July, August 2023 services for $5,500 coming out of the architectural budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, hearing none, coming to the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
I,
Roy,
Aye.
Lynn,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. Okay, that's all I've got for invoices. With that, unless there's a burning question, then I'd like to close down the school master plan. Thank you very much, Doran Whittier, Michelle, Don. That was good stuff.
Hey, thank you, everyone.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I'm now going to move to the library space utilization. And I will turn that to Hank.
Yes. And the information that I distributed, the final report, is pretty much redundant with prior presentations to this committee. I don't know that it's necessary that we go through the entire report itself, as you've seen the evolution as to how we got from there to here. Brett is online and can help answer any questions, or if you want to have a summary, Stuart, I don't know if you need that. As we discussed at the last meeting, Kim Hewitt has moved on, so Dimitri, I should introduce you to the PBBC, is now acting director. Dimitri, I guess we don't have to go through and introduce people by name because you can see everybody's name in the little box underneath their faces. So thank you for joining us, Dimitri, and Erhard, thank you for joining us as well. So Stuart, do you have any specific questions?
I don't, but I will ask the committee if anybody in the committee has any questions at this stage, to please raise your hand or jump in with any questions. I'm just looking, I don't see anything, Hank. Of course, we've been through the couple discussions and also through the information that's been shared. At this stage, I would just ask what's the next steps that have been set out.
Well, in terms of the next steps, the identification of priorities has been established by the report. So it would then take that information and the cost estimates that were included in the report to include within the capital improvement plan for the library and then meshing that with the town's priorities for other projects, such as the school master plan, such as the DPW, such as the CAF, space utilization study. These phasing pieces assume a certain schedule, but there's no guarantee that the projects will proceed according to that schedule. That will be really come out of the discussion with FinCom and with others about what can be afforded and when. The first phase, though, would be the improvement to the teen and tween area, as identified within the report.
Is there anything from the committee that we need to do, Hank? Do we need to write a summary on top of the report and close it out and hand it off, or?
I think, as previous studies, you've accepted the study.
Yep.
Erhard, I know you've had a chance to review it in detail and walked us as we took the circuitous path to conclusion. And I don't know if you have any comments that you want to make.
I think, for one thing, the library trustees are kind of excited to look at this plan and figure out how do we move forward on it. Obviously, we have another priority that's landed in our laps this fall, which is the hiring of a new library director, and we'd want to be moving forward in partnership with that new director on redesign work. That being said, we also do want to figure out if we can move forward sooner rather than later on some of these early phases, because I know we're all excited to do that. And so any advice we have in terms of coordinating with the other committees here in the town to move that forward would be greatly appreciated.
I think from my perspective, the reality is that, we've done the study that we've been charged to do, and we need to move this forward as a basis for looking at capital expenditures, and then it's up to the select board and FinCom to decide how they're going to allocate funding for various projects. But we've done everything we could do at this point. I think it's not really our role to go any further, other than to say this is a study that we've completed and we agree with the study. The numbers are going to change as you move forward, of course.
Yes, and this project would not be immune to cost escalation factors in the general marketplace.
Sure. Well, none of them are. So the reality is going to be, what do we have available to spend, and which projects are going to be potential targets. So I think we've done what we need to do. I don't think we need to do any more.
Okay.
Hank, do you need like a motion from the committee to recommend this to move forward?
To accept the final report, I think, would be helpful.
Okay, so why don't we do that? Why don't we put forth a motion to accept the report in its current state?
Second.
Any questions? Okay, so with that, we'll go to the roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Gene?
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
Gerhard?
Hi.
Dimitri?
Dimitri is non-voting,
He's non-voting, okay?
and
And the chair is aye. Okay, all right.
before we close it out, I would like to thank Brett and his team for a very professional process. We appreciate all of your thoughtful responses to the issues at hand and diligent investigation of the problems. So hopefully things will be able to move forward per the schedule, but if not, we look forward to working with you.
Great. And I wanted to say thank you to all the committee members for some very valuable feedback all along the way. So thanks so much. And of course to you, Hank, for guiding us so carefully through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we close this out, we have one invoice, which is the UTL invoice. So I'm going to put forth that invoice for July 2023 services for $8,100 coming out of the architectural budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Hearing none, see none, roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Rowan?
Aye.
Gerhard?
Aye.
And chair's aye. Great. Okay, so we will close that down. Thank you very much, Brett, and Neil, and the user community, Dimitri and Gerhard. And we will now move to the climate action plan. We're running just a few minutes late here, but is that something that you're taking, Hank, to introduce Stephen and folks?
Yes, I will introduce Stephen. I'll just also note that the presentation you're seeing from Stephen tonight will be the same presentation that's given to the select board tomorrow evening. They will also receive a presentation from the DOER, and that presentation goes more into the what is the opt-in special code. And Stephen, I'm sure you can answer any questions that people might have about the what, but also if you could walk us through your presentation, which is really the why.
Thanks, Hank. That's a good introduction. I actually did tailor and added a few more slides for the what back into my presentation for tonight. But that said, DOER will be at the meeting for the select board, and they're certainly much more experts about the code than I am. So if you are able to attend, that would be a great opportunity. Let me share my screen. And I'll try to hit my best to work through this quickly. About 14 slides, but I won't spend too much time on every one of them. The first is just like the why are we doing this code? And so this is a pie chart of Needham's greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors. So passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, residential commercial buildings. And the key thing to note is that about 2/3, just under 2/3 of all of Needham's greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings, homes, municipal buildings, commercial buildings. And it's the electricity that runs those homes, it's the heating and cooling in those homes, it's the cooking in those homes, et cetera. All of that is about 64%. And so for that reason, it was a high priority for the Climate Action Plan Committee to recommend that we adopt the opt-in specialized code, which was just released. I also just want some context for this group that really only 2% of Needham's greenhouse emissions come from its municipal buildings. So it's a relatively small slice overall, but it's the majority of the town of Needham's greenhouse gas emissions. Most of the emissions come from municipal buildings. You know, one of the things that the Climate Action Plan Committee has been thinking is not just about all of the residential construction that's happening in town, and roughly 100 tear downs a year. And those homes are often very large that replace them. But there are municipal projects on the horizon, Mitchell, Pollard, and the DPW building. A little bit of history just to remind everybody how we got here. The stretch code was originally, the stretch code, which is what's in Needham today, was originally created as part of the Green Communities Act in 2009. And it was required for towns to participate in the Green Communities Grant Program that they adopt the stretch code. And it set efficiency requirements about 20 to 35% above the base energy code and was updated every 3 years. It took a while, but in 2019, we adopted that stretch energy code, became a green community. And that has been the code under which all buildings since 2020 have been built under. In 2021, the State Climate Act of 2021 established the Department of Energy Resources as the Stretch Energy Code Authority and mandated a new energy code. be developed, which would provide a pathway to net zero. So essentially the state recognized that the stretch energy code, even with updates, would not get the state to net zero and mandated a new code be developed. 2022 DOER released that updated stretch code and then a new opt-in specialized code. The updated stretch code went into effect for Needham in January. And so all new construction and renovations are now subject to that updated stretch code. And we're recommending that the town also adopt the opt-in specialized code, which will be on the fall town warrant. There are already a number of municipalities that have adopted this code. Most of them are in our immediate vicinity. So Wellesley, Brookline, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Watertown, Arlington, Lincoln, and Lexington. So the code is already in effect in most of these towns, went into effect. Some have gone into effect for July 1, 2023. Some will also go into effect January 1. Watertown, Boston, Brookline, and Cambridge, I believe, were the first 4 in. Actually, Brookline, Cambridge, Somerville, and Watertown were the first 4 in. So just the conceptually, I mean, if you think of the codes as a layer cake, which each one building on the underlying code, the updated stretch code, which is where we're at, builds on the updated base code. And then the new opt-in specialized code would include the updated stretch energy code and the base code, in addition to some additional requirements and some appendices. So this is just some very high level summaries of the code. The first to know, and this is something that's very important, is that the opt-in specialized code, if adopted, has no additional requirements for additions, alterations, or renovations. It is only governing new construction. And there's also, for new construction, no additional requirements for all electric construction. So if your building is all electric, no fossil fuels, no requirements, additional requirements. There's one minor exception to that, which I'll get to in a minute. It does not, this is very important, it does not require electric only. So you can still build with fossil fuels in new construction, but when you do, you need to pre-wire for electric conversion in the future. And that's to provide consumer protection for future costly renovation retrofits. There's a minimum amount of solar that needs to be installed to offset the fossil fuel emissions. And then for residential homes over 4,000 square feet must offset all of the home's energy use with solar. And the exception I was mentioning is for all multifamily units over 12,000 square feet, they'll need to meet passive house criteria. This is already being done in many affordable housing projects today. And it significantly lowers the life cycle costs and eligible for mass save incentives. So one of the questions I thought this group might be interested in is, does the opt-in specialized code require schools and municipal buildings to be built to a higher level of efficiency? The answer is no, if they're all electric. So if the buildings are all electric, there's no additional requirements. In other words, the opt-in specialized energy code efficiency ratings are identical to those for the updated stretch code, which is already in effect in Needham. Again, only if the building is all electric. Building all electric today does eliminate the need for future costly retrofits. So again, one of the benefits of going all electric. Fossil fuel is allowed, but the school would have to be, or the building would have to be pre-wired for future all electric heating, cooling. And solar PV may be required on site. So this is a summary that comes from DOER below. And you'd notice the minimum efficiency in an all electric, it's TEDI or passive house pathways for both the stretch code and the opt-in code. Electrification, if it's not electric, both are going to be fully electric. For EV wiring, both of the stretch code and the opt-in code have the same requirement of 20% of parking space for residential business use and 10% for other uses. And for renewable generation in all electric construction, It's optional for under both the stretch code and the opt-in specialized code. In the mixed fuels, everything's the same, except you note that under electrification, when you use fossil fuels in the construction, you need to pre-wire for electric only in the future, and on-site solar PV may be required in some cases. And that's it. That's the essence of the difference. One other note, just where MSBA funding comes in. I believe, Hank, you can confirm this, but MSBA has already stated that they will compensate at a higher rate if the building is built all electric and to the specialized code. So if the town has to have adopted the specialized code and choose an all electric building, and I believe it's 3%, Hank.
That's correct. And the LEED silver that we built Sunita Williams to is now the minimum requirement for an MSBA school.
LEED silver. Okay. So one of the questions we hear is, does it have any impact on renovations? No. Opt-in specialized energy code only applies to new construction, not to existing structures. Those existing structures would be subject to the updated stretch code, or depending on if there's small minor updates to the base code. So Emery Grover renovation, for example, would still have been covered by the stretch code, even if the opt-in specialized code had been adopted prior to that project being initiated. So again, only new construction. This may be of interest to you. Do we get the question, won't the electric grid be overwhelmed by building electrification? The Climate Action Plan Committee invited Eversource in for a very lengthy conversation on this very question. It's a recorded meeting, so if you're ever interested in diving deep into the wonky world of electricity supply generation, transmission, you can go to the April 2023 meeting. They presented that Needham actually has sufficient capacity to support full electrification by 2050, already installed in our transmission and substation. So they expressed no concerns about our ability to follow a full electrification pathway. They do continuously reforecast demand and update their 5-year plan accordingly. So, if we had very large new construction projects built in town, for example, like under the MBTA Communities Act, they would probably reforecast under that scenario. They did mention that at the local street level, it's possible that the transformers may need to be upgraded, as we had with PSAB when the EV chargers went in. Those are minor investments for Eversource. They do sometimes get into a queue, as I think we experienced. But that was the extent of what they meant, what they thought our capacity constraints might be occasional at the local level.
Do they have the capacity to provide electrification within the state of Massachusetts?
So different municipalities have different constraints. Some other municipalities have substations that are closer to what they call the 90% threshold. So they like to assume that there's a buffer in their capacity to compensate for the worst heat days or the worst cold days, as well as potentially some of their major assets being knocked offline during events like that. So they use a 90% threshold, and there are other municipalities who are at that threshold or near that threshold. And so their 5-year plan is focused on upgrading those local substations and transmission lines to make them.
My question relates to, do they have the capability to develop that much electricity availability if everybody went electric? Or are they, do they have to add capacity within the state, or are they wheeling this in from Canada or around the country? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so when Eversource was there, they're focusing more on the transmission side, not on the supply side. There are other initiatives at the state level to increase the supply, the electricity supply. So for example, the offshore wind farms that have been funded in recent years is an effort by the state to generate more electricity supply. The electricity coming in from Canada is another source that they're trying to get additional capacity in, electric supply capacity in. I do understand that a couple of the wind farm contracts are being renegotiated or canceled because of the interest rate environment that those companies find themselves in now. So they'll be rebidding those in the next year. But they do believe that they're going to have enough supply as well, given state and
this isn't the place for it, but that's a really debatable issue, especially since, for example, there's lots of power available in Canada, but we can't get it through New Hampshire and Vermont to get it down here to use it. And it's hydropower, about as clean as you can get.
I think there's some developments in Maine. Was one of the areas, I haven't looked at it recently, but I believe there's been progress on getting that supply through Maine. There's been some ruling at the
That would be
Supreme
great.
Court.
I was just, as I said, I don't think this is the place for it, but it's a huge issue. And that's why it's going to take a little longer for electrification. We can have goals for it, but Eversource says, okay, we'll transmit it, but where's it going to come from? I don't know.
That's
Anyway.
as you know, George, that's not their responsibility. They no longer generate electricity. So that's
I understand that, but somebody's got to generate it in order or buy it or wheel it, or I was in that business for a long time, so I understand the process, but I know that just in the transmission part of it. But the fact is that somebody's got to generate it. It's got to come from somewhere.
Agreed.
But anyway, that's another issue.
Okay, great.
So the other point to make is that the grid is actually operating 20% below our all-time system peak in 2006. So that has a lot to do with the energy efficiency measures that have gone into place in recent years. And by 2035, the prediction is that we will switch from summer peaking to winter peaking. And so, this is the heat pumps. As heat pumps come in and they're more efficient than air conditioners, we see less demand there. But we'll see more demand in the winter months as people switch from fossil fuel heat to electric heat. This is not forecast to require additional transmission upgrades in the next 10 years. And there is additional capacity planned as well. So just a couple more and we'll be done, and we have more questions. Just summary of the stretch energy code differences. This is for new residential construction. So there are some differences between dwellings that are below 4,000 square feet of conditioned space and those that are above 4,000 square feet of conditioned space. In the smaller homes, if you have fossil fuels, you'll be required to pre-wire it for electricity, and you may have some solar PV requirements as well. For the larger homes, the major difference is they're going to be required to generate as much electricity on site as they use in the house energy. So it's a much more efficient HERS 0 versus a HERS 42 that they'll be required if fossil fuels go in. Prediction, a lot of them will end up just staying all electric. It'll be cheaper for them to build that way, and it'll be a better house for the homeowner. We've already covered the schools and offices, so I won't go in there. High ventilation has its own small changes. And again, it's with mixed fuels, there's some pre-wiring required and some on-site solar PV required in some cases. For multifamily, up to greater than 12,000 square feet, I mentioned this before, they'll have to go to passive house under the specialized code. So that reduces the number of pathways for these large residential units. I understand that would simplify things for the building commissioner. So there's just one pathway. And then again, mixed fuels pre-wiring is required. And then for small commercial, same, very similar, pre-wired required, solar PV required in some cases. So that's the end of my slide.
Excellent.
I'll see if there's any questions.
There is one question for Erwin.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question kind of similar to George's. Do you have any sense of the commitment that companies like Eversource plan to do to upgrade the grid? Because you think about without the grid being upgraded, transmission losses are higher than if the grid was upgraded and more efficient. Is there any phase-in plans by companies like Eversource to move towards a more efficient grid?
Yeah, so there's actually a major grid modernization effort that's happening at the state level right now, and I believe all of National Grid, Eversource, I think there might be another one out there somewhere, have had to provide their modernization plans to DOER and DPU. And so I don't know what the exact timing of that is, but there's a very large amount of state funding that is directed towards that grid modernization efforts. Michael, do you have more insight into that? Michael?
No, you're right. So all three, Unitil was the only one that had to do it, and grid mod is a huge. There's an awful lot of people working on it, including industry folks, because it is the big question. How do we get it done? So there's a lot of focus on it from the DPU, and a lot of it's around kicking the DPU to get them moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, my understanding, the utilities are highly motivated for this because they see more customers, they see more revenue coming from the fossil fuel companies to them. So you think about, ExxonMobil has the market for gas cars today. Well, in 50 years, it's going to be Eversource has the market for powering vehicles in the state. So it's a big source of income for them, even though it's a regulated industry.
Yeah, and grid mod is not just about making the pipes bigger. It's about how you handle distributed gen, because that is part of the solution to the new grid, is that there will be more distribution on the grid, more solar homes with storage, more EVs, vehicle fleets will be plugged in and providing demand response, providing energy to the grid. So it's not just about making the pipes bigger. It's how do you make the grid smarter and make it distributed so that we can actually use a lot of electricity at different times.
Right. Yeah, I think there's also some changes in permitting as well for those solar projects. So I think today the utilities often will take these projects one at a time and consider them through their process before connecting them, and that they're being required by the state now to do them in blocks. So that should help bring more supply into the grid sooner. So it's like a multi-prong effort.
Yeah, right now, for example, I don't believe Eversource has the capability to say to a homeowner, you have an electric car, I only want you to charge it between 1 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the morning. And they don't even allow it to charge during any other times. But they don't have the capability to do that.
Well,
So
they have some
smart grid, really.
There's capability around tying into the HVAC systems now, and trying to control that. And they've offered out to, at least they've offered out to me, residential, if we want to go into it, they'll actually adjust.
And you get some credits for that, I believe, as well as I go large.
I'm really
Also a
talking about
DPU issue, because the things that Eversource would love to do, like incent you to charge your car or to use at a different time, they can only do by having rates that are modifiable. So,
exactly.
DPU
But
issue.
I'm really talking more about smart grid, which would basically not even give you a choice. If you have an electric car, that's when your car gets charged, period. And they control whether or not there's electricity available for you to charge it during those off-peak hours. And so, we're a long way from that, but we need to get to that in order to really utilize the electricity in the most efficient way.
Hank?
Yeah, Concord has a municipal light plant, and they do that in Concord. By signing up, I get a rebate on our electric cars, and but even if I'm plugged in, I can't recharge during peak hours. It can only recharge while I'm in off peak.
Right.
So that's a choice.
But
a choice
that's
everyone needs to make.
That's a municipality that's running their own grid.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is you got to get National Grid and Eversource and Unitil to figure out how to do that. And the only way to do that is to make the grid smart. And the only way to do that is to redo the grid. So there's a lot of work ahead. You're right.
Okay, let me pull it back. Stephen, you got another slide?
Nope, I'm done with the slides. I was just answering questions.
Great, okay. Super. I'd like to draw a close. Is there any action we need to take on this? I think this is very helpful. I think what this tells me is, as a committee, we need to be very aware of this as we get into our next building cycles, because this will have to be considered, especially if town meeting adopts it, I think.
If town meeting adopts it, it would go into effect July 1st,
Okay.
2024. So any project that starts after that would be subject to the opt-in code. I mean, I think one of the key questions that will probably come up, and it'd be good to know from the PBVC, is, are fossil fuels still being considered for future projects, or are you now moving into an all-electric phase? If you did move to all-electric, would that have any negative impacts on the projects that you're looking to build? So I think you probably, these are types of questions that I'm expecting to come from Finance Committee, like what would the impact be on Mitchell and Pollard and future DPW?
Right. I think, Hank, we would be prepared. I don't suggest we get into a conversation now on it, but I would ask Hank to basically to take that, and maybe we could add that to our next or second post meeting from here. I think it's a very valid point. I mean, because I think, if you look at Mitchell, where I mean, Barry probably can answer existing, and certainly depending on the track we take with the Mitchell, Pollard, and High Rock, whether we are going to continue to replace boilers and maintain, or whether as we build new, we actually go out of it. But I think if we're going to replace boilers like in Mitchell, that's going to hang for a little bit until Mitchell gets replaced. So long and short of it is, maybe Hank, maybe you and Barry could pull together a perspective on that.
Certainly, and as we discussed at the last meeting, the transition at Elliott is going all electric for the new equipment that we're putting in. So that is in process right now.
And that's a renovation.
I just want to remind that renovations are not subject to the opt-in code at all.
But
it
at
is
least
a good
we're going
idea.
in that direction to support it. So
Yeah, it's good that you're moving in that direction. I love that. But for the purposes of town meeting, they'll want to know, what is the impact of adopting the opt-in code on projects that are in the pipeline?
yeah. So that'd be great, Hank, if you could.
Yes, I'll forward some links that Stephen gave me. One in Lexington, where the select board member was making an argument on a cash flow basis that it's actually less expensive to build a net zero school than it is to use the old system.
Yep.
And there are probably at least a half a dozen schools already built and operating. I've been to one of them, and as I see more opportunities to tour some of those schools, I'll let the committee know.
All right, great. So we'll draw a close to this item.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. And the
Appreciate the time.
Okay, so we've got two things left. We've got the DPW agenda item, and then we also have two voting items on the public safety. It probably makes sense to do the DPW, and then we can do the last voting items. Is there anything from a DPW standpoint that we need to discuss? The report has been sent out. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read it. But really this agenda item is really to open up to any last minute questions or issues. But Hank, do you want to preface anything?
Well, Catherine, I don't know if you can see Mike Richard. He was driving back from Western Massachusetts.
Oh, there he is.
Wasn't sure whether he'd be able to join us. And I don't think that we need to go through the full presentation. You've seen most of it before. What you hadn't seen were some of the estimated hard costs associated with the options. But while we have Shane here and Barry, yeah, we can.
I think Michael can talk now.
Yeah, you did. You found me.
Oh, there he is. There you
go. And so if we need to review this, what I will say is, since our last presentation to the committee, Weston and Sampson has refined some of the site diagrams, the site study diagrams. They are substantially similar in terms of the big picture, similar to what you saw previously. And there are 4 options. And maybe before we jump to the cost estimates, I'd first ask if there are any questions about those 4 options.
Anyone? Questions?
I might add.
They're the same 4 options we had before, right?
Correct. And I think what has also been added is some thinking about how it's phased and how the reconstruction of 470 Dedham Avenue could be phased. Perhaps it's most difficult to phase option 1 because that's the version that has the existing all the existing facilities going back into that facility on the same site. And so in terms of phasing, it also requires the demolition of the 6-bay garage. And so there would need to be a lot of temporary for 1 or more years, keeping the existing fleet outdoors, i.e. not under cover, just because there's no capacity to do so. And it would also potentially force the town to finance it, the entire project in subsequent years in order to get it fully constructed. Whereas some of the other projects could be phased over a greater number of years and improvements would be continuously made with each phase. So if there are no other questions, Michael, do we want to jump to the hard costs, or Stuart?
Yeah. You want me to pull it up on the screen?
Yeah, just a summary, quick summary.
Yeah.
So we've refined the, can everyone see my screen, by the way?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So we have refined the cost. Option 1 is the consolidated option, and it is we broke it out into each of the different sites, from 470, 500 Dedham Ave. We have an allowance in there for some minor renovations, daily building renovations, RTS, and then we have an option to demo the daily building and replace it in its entirety. So with that, it's a total of $59,120,000. Option 2 is option 2 and option 3, if you recall, are very similar. That is a campus style approach with 2 of the divisions being located at either parcel 74 or Hillside. You can see those are very comparable in costs, with a difference of about $1 million each. And then option 4 is the Cogswell building. And that is the middle ground in terms of cost at $61,200,000.
And George, we did look at your suggestion of studying putting another department up there, another division up there. And it would be, while it might be feasible, we couldn't we didn't see how it could be constructed like a donut. Right now, the current layout is a U shape, taking the L and adding another wing to it, as you recall.
Right.
And if we were to bring another department out there, you would probably need to extend that wing toward Central Avenue, because you need turning radiuses inside the courtyard. We also need employee parking on that site. So while it's feasible, all of that new construction would have to be doing an equal or greater amount of rock blasting compared to what we did previously. The contours, particularly going toward the abutters, go into an existing rock face. And so the good news there is that about half of that exterior new wall would be partially buried in that rock. The bad news is that we would have to be blasting yet closer to that abutter.
But still doable.
It's still doable, and we would also have to get through the permitting. Part of the reason why we felt that putting the maintenance bays up there made sense was because there's very little traffic volume coming and going from that division. And they come in the morning, they work all day. They're typically any of the trucks that need to be reworked on could be brought in the day before, and if necessary, parked within the seasonal storage building or under the cover of the shed, and then just driven in as needed for their repairs during the day. And then regular maintenance, likewise, that could all be scheduled. Once you put one of the other divisions there, there is more coming and going from the building. But that was the rationale behind the layout for option 4.
It's still a valid option.
It still is a valid option. And if we went in that direction, then the amount of reconstruction at 470 would be less.
Right, which would make it, I think, a lot easier to phase it if you moved some of it over to Cogswell. So I think you've accomplished what I wanted you to do, is to go in and think about how we could do that over at Cogswell. And it does free up space at 470, which I think makes it easier to plug everything in there in terms of space.
Yeah, and when you look at option 4 at 470, you can see there's a pretty clear demarcation line between what would be phase 1 and phase 2.
Yep.
And Shane, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. George, one other thing to consider with that is by adding another division there, we would actually make the constraints on the site even tighter at Cogswell due to the equipment. The other divisions would be either highway, water, sewer, drain, or parks and forestry. So to be able to try to cram all the equipment that each one of those divisions has, no matter which division it would be, the site constraint there by adding a second division up there at the Cogswell would just be too much.
All right. As I said, I think you've accomplished what I wanted you to do. And so I think that shows us what the options are.
Okay. Just to validate, Hank, do we need to vote to accept where this is at this point? You're on mute.
It's not up to this committee to decide which option to go down. And I should note that, as in the footnotes here, these cost numbers do not include all of the soft costs. So we're working on those, but soft costs, as you know, will add somewhere between 25 and 30% to the hard costs. And those soft costs would include not only design, but it would the design costs, OPM costs, testing costs, all the normal things that we add into, and also owner's contingency, and there is some construction contingency built into these numbers, but
They're all going to be the same. All the options are going to be almost the same. There's some variation, right?
Yeah.
They'll be very similar. Yeah.
I think it would be good to. Did you put a number of a note down at the bottom about what that potential soft cost would be?
Yes.
And I don't think we should give them a number. Just a percentage would be fine.
Yeah. The second bullet there, soft costs typically add between 25 and 30% of the construction costs.
It's tiny on my screen, so that's all right.
Okay.
I got it.
Chair, I think we can move to accept the report and then transmit it to the town manager for further action.
Okay, great, because I wouldn't expect us to do the options.
No.
As much as us to accept the report. So why don't we put forth a motion to accept the report as is and deliver according to our responsibility.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to a vote. Roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Ruin?
Aye.
Shane?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
And the chair is aye. Okay, great. Okay, with that, I think we are done with this agenda item. I do have two more invoices to approve, if I can ask the committee to address that. The Public Safety Complex and Fire Station 2. Ken, there's two invoices. One is the requisition 47. I'll put forth for approval for Consigli Construction. That's requisition 47 through August 2023. It's a final invoice. And before I do finish that out, does that mean we're done, Ken? We can actually
not if you include the sign
yeah.
for Fire Station 2.
All right, so we're close to finally getting this project where we can formally in this committee close it down. But for the moment, we're just going to do the invoice. Requisition 47 for $26,072.17 coming out of the general contractor budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
George, any questions?
Yes, a question about is the sign you're talking?
I don't believe he's going to be able to sell it.
Is the sign you're talking about the sign that used to be the wooden sign there by the fire station?
Yes, the gentleman that was going to do it, the original maker of it, has backed out. And so, the guy from the Chamber of Commerce is looking for alternate manufacturers. And we've told him that, he really needs to get us an answer by the end of the month, or we're not going to be able to put it into the project because we want to close the project out.
Yep.
Okay, all set, George?
Yep.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none, come to roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
Shane? Excuse me. Is there any user group? There is no user group here. Okay,
No.
so the chair is aye. Okay. Last invoice is for Wrist Frost Shumway for July 2023 commissioning services for Fire Station 2. And I put forth that invoice for $398 coming out of the miscellaneous budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, George. With that, any questions?
Is that the last invoice? On that?
I'm not 100% sure for them. I've got a query into them to ensure that they have billed everything.
Okay, all set, George?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking if they're finished and our contractor was finished, then we could allocate some funding for the sign and essentially
I
rescind the
do.
rest.
There are a few other invoices hanging out there for some of the interview room stuff that I'm chasing down.
You mean FF&E stuff?
Not really. It's base building stuff that was added, but it wasn't part of the contract. It was done by the town's vendor because it was cheaper to do it that way.
Okay.
They just finished that up last week.
Okay.
So we're almost there.
Yes.
Okay, super. All right, with that, go to the roll call. Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Roy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
And chair is aye. All right, thank you. All right, with that, the only other item I just quickly had was the next meeting. So Hank, I know we have basically the Emery Grover Ken potential topic. So do we need that next meeting?
I don't think that we do. We will be coming back in October for update on the RTU replacement. We've engaged in your last meeting, you voted for Enterprise Equipment Company. We've initiated, we're finalizing the contract, getting all the signed paperwork from them. And so I don't think we overloaded this meeting, so we didn't have to do the second meeting in September.
Okay, but in terms of the brickwork and everything else discussion, can that hold till the meeting post the 23rd?
Ken?
26th, I mean.
Right now, I'd say yes because of the timing, but if we get answers, I'd rather have the discussion sooner rather than later because that will shrink the additional schedule time the quicker we get an answer, because this is not a $5,000 change order that I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and do it and I'll get committee approval at the next meeting. This is gonna.
My suggestion would be then, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have to shift that meeting given the holiday. I'm also out, would ask Richard to chair. So I might suggest over the next course of this week, Hank and Ken, if you could help us understand whether we will have enough information to have that discussion. If we do, it does sound like it's important to have it. If not, we will push to the following meeting.
And
thank-
I believe Catherine has already adjusted it on your agenda, so it's the 26th, not the
26th, the Tuesday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could just confirm whether we will be in a position to have that discussion.
Okay.
If not, I'm gonna suggest to the committee that we not have that, hold that meeting. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, great. That was what I had on the other business. Any other business from anybody else? Nothing? Okay. Then I know it's late. We did cover a lot of ground, so I appreciate everybody sticking through it. It's important to get through these items. So with that, I will call a close to the meeting. If there's no objection, I will say have a great week, everybody.
You too.
Here.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Good night.
They